Fair warning, this video is not about painting miniatures, not at all. This is about Age of Sigmar Soulbound, the role-playing game. However, I do intend to use miniatures when playing that game, but once again, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video, however, is that I'm planning to start a campaign as the Game Master next year with a group of friends. And these friends are seasoned Dungeons & Dragons players, but they have never ever played anything Warhammer related. In fact, they know next to nothing about Warhammer. So that made me think how best to introduce someone to Warhammer, and I have thought about an introductionary scenario which I would like to share with you to get your point of view and maybe some suggestions on how to change it, improve it, what you like, what you don't like, etc. And yeah. So get some tea or coffee and please listen to this video. And I really hope my future players are not watching this video. Oh dear. This scenario is simply called Welcome to Warhammer, and I'm going to inform my players of that once we start playing the game. And my idea goes something like this. Imagine session 0. Me and the players meet up and I explain the rules to the game and they all make their characters. That's it. Session 1. Everyone gets handed their characters, including their background stories I prepared for them. Of course, in cooperation with my players. When everyone has read their background, I ask them if they are all ready to begin the game. When everyone affirms, I ask them to give me back their characters, and then I hand them some new ones I've made without their knowledge, and explain these are for an introductory scenario I've made called Welcome to Warhammer. The players are now playing 3 or 4, depending on the number of players, princes. They live in a castle in a kingdom with an over-the-top sounding good name. I am very open to suggestions. Ruled by their father, King Richard Goodwill. Incredibly, the players/brothers are all 6 feet and 10 inches tall, making them truly stand out in any crowd as the noble princes they are. The kingdom is green, pleasant, happy, and everyone gets along. No wars, disease, evilness, or anything like that. However, the king summons the players as he has some disturbing news. When the players arrive in the throne room, the king sits in his throne while a painter is in the process of making his portrait. The king tells the players that they can speak freely as the commissioned painter is completely deaf. I then show the players handout A, which is the painting they see being created. The king then tells the players that an otherwise usually loyal duke has been discovered to give vital secret information to another kingdom, and this cannot continue or go unpunished. King Richard Goodwill lives up to his name, and he is known throughout his kingdom as a benevolent and fair ruler. Everyone loves and respects the good king, and life is good under his rule. The king, very saddened and disturbed by the bad news about his duke, asked the players to take a small group of loyal soldiers and travel out to the Duke's keep at night and slay him. The king prefers that the Duke's demise look like an accident, rather than have him stand public trial as he still respects his Duke, and he doesn't want to worry his population over the news of a treacherous Duke. The players then arrive near the keep at midnight in a heavy rainfall, with a handful of soldiers at their disposal. The task? Slay the Duke and everyone else in his keep, leave no witnesses. How the players manage this is completely up to them. This is the point where the scenario really begins and everything is in the players' control. The keep is very small and the soldiers that the players command have surrounded the place in the moonless night. The soldiers are all on foot while the players are mounted on noble steeds. A sergeant approaches them and affirms that the Duke seems to be home, but he is not alone. The Duke is with 2 or 3 guards and his wife. The sergeant then seems somewhat uncomfortable, and when the players press him for what's wrong, he informs them that the sounds of a baby crying has been heard from within the keep. What the players do about this dilemma is up to them, but the orders are clear: leave no witnesses and try to make it look like an accident. However, how this is played out is 100% up to the players. Whatever happens, dead Duke or not, the players will eventually return home to their father's magnificent castle, with golden towers, marble floors, expensive paintings, and so on and so on. As soon as the players arrive back home, a distressed guard tells them that the king wants to see them immediately, and the guard cannot explain why or what's going on, only that it is important that they see their father as soon as possible. When the players arrive in the throne room, their father informs them that more bad news have occurred. While the players were away on their secret mission, a break-in has happened. Apparently, 3 peasants have snuck into the castle, maybe in search for valuables. They were discovered by a guard whom they struck down only to barricade themselves afterwards in a room somewhere in the castle. The guard is badly wounded and unconscious and might not survive his injuries. The king asked the players to handle the situation and try to capture the intruders alive so that they can stand trial for their crimes. The players arrive at a door with a couple of armed guards in front of it, explaining that the intruders have barricaded the door from inside. A woman weeping uncontrollably can be heard from behind the door. Suddenly, a stern voice can be heard from the inside yelling out, "Do your worst, you monsters! I'm not afraid of you, come inside and face my wrath." After that, the players can hear the barricades be removed behind the door. The voice then repeats its intimidation, and the players can now do what they see fit. The door is no longer barricaded. At this point, the scenario gets a little bit railroaded, but not much. The first player, whoever that is, to enter the room is knocked out by a hammer blow to the head as soon as he opens the door and peeks inside. He is now unconscious, and the remaining players are left to deal with the situation. A dwarven with bright orange hair, red glowing runes burning in his skin, and a pair of hammers on fire jumps out of the room and attacks the remaining players and the guards. Think about the Fireslayer Grimhold Exile miniature, and yes, as I mentioned in the beginning, I use miniatures in my games. The fight should be a little challenging, but manageable for the remaining players who are aided by the 2 guards stationed at the door. The dwarven cannot be reasoned with and attacks uncontrollably and with a frenzy. This fight can only end in the dwarven's death. As I mentioned in the beginning, my players know nothing about Warhammer and even less about Fireslayers, so I thought this would make it interesting and might boggle their minds about what the heck this is they are fighting. Once the fight is concluded, the players can enter the room. Inside are 2 people, a young man and a young woman. The woman is crouched up in a corner, sobbing, while the man stands protective in front of her, armed only with a dagger and no armor of any kind. The woman is unarmed. As soon as the first player actually steps inside the room, the woman screams uncontrollably for a second and then faints. The man looks visibly disturbed and is clearly shaking. Obviously no threat to the noble, well-armed knights the players are. The king ordered the players to take the intruders alive, but the man does not respond at all to any verbal communication, and he is visibly afraid of the players whom just killed his dwarven companion. How the players choose to capture him is up to them. He is no danger at all, and the woman is still unconscious. After their capture, the king is horrified to learn that one of his sons is unconscious, and attacking royalty is clearly one of the worst offenses you could possibly make. The unconscious player then wakes up, and his wound taken care of by the kingdom's very best physicians. For the rest of the scenario, however, his head will be wrapped in bandage, and he will have a terrible headache. Other than that, he is completely fine and functional. Sometime later, the king asked the players to decide what should happen to the 2 prisoners who broke into the castle. No information at all has been gathered from either the man or the woman, as they refuse to talk with the interrogator. No torture has been applied. This is a good and kind king, remember? So, the king tasked the players to decide their fate. The king himself is in doubt, as he has never given the death sentence to anyone during his already long and peaceful rule. But intruding into his castle and, much worse, attacking the prince is an unforgivable crime. So the sentence is up to the players, and they are given a day to decide. If the players visit the prisoners in their cell, no information of any kind can be provided. The woman constantly cries and outright screams in terror if any of the players communicate to her directly. The man is more controlled, but visibly very afraid, yet refusing to talk with the players. He only mutters quietly to himself whenever the players talk. However, the player with the headache begins to hallucinate from time to time, thanks to his head injury. For example, if the players visits the prisoners, when the woman screams in terror, the wounded player could swear that he sees one of the other players make an evil grin, even though that is definitely not the case. The man seems to be saying "monsters" over and over again to himself, but only the injured player seems to be able to hear this. It just sounds like wordless muttering to the healthy players. So, the players really have nothing to work with other than their own opinions. The following day, the players are summoned to the castle's courtroom. A few people are gathered on some benches that stands before a scene that holds a large chair in the middle and an executioner's block, yes, really, standing next to the chair. One of the attendees is a woman who is wiping her tears away with a handkerchief while she sits on the bench. This is the wife of the wounded guard, who is still unconscious and his fate unknown. A few other people sit on the benches as well, and just inside the room next to the entrance stands a guard proudly carrying the king's noble banner. The front row seats are reserved for the players. As soon as they enter, the wounded player's headache intensifies. For a split second, he sees blood dripping from the king's banner. When the players are seated, a man wearing a large robe and with a judge's wig enters the scene from a side doorway. He is followed by a man wearing an executioner's hood and carrying a large axe. The judge asks everyone to be silent and for the prisoners to be brought forth. Two guards enter the room, each following a chained prisoner to the front of the scene. The judge, in a very accusing voice, informs the courtroom about the heinous crimes committed by the prisoners against the king and princess, and thus against the entire peaceful kingdom of, insert over-the-top good name for the kingdom here. The players had nothing to work with when assigned the task of deciding what should happen to the two surviving intruders. This is completely on purpose on my part. You'll understand why if you listen on. The judge then asked the princess, thus the players, what should be the fate of the intruders. In this moment, the wounded player will see blood dripping down the judge's forehead and suddenly a smell of foul stench of rot. He vomits, to the unpleasant surprise of everyone in the courtroom. The judge then points at the prisoners, saying loudly, "This is all on you, criminals." He then repeats his question to the players after the wounded player is feeling better again and his illusions stop once more. I assume the players will ask for the death penalty. This is a little important for the plot, otherwise I'll have to find a way to work around it, should the players choose to let the intruders live. If and when the death sentence is applied, the two intruders are beheaded right then and there on the scene by the executioner. The sobbing woman first, who screams loudly just before she is killed, and the now completely silent man afterwards. And his head roll into the basket. I conclude the scenario, look at the players and say, "Welcome to Warhammer." The players might be a little perplexed about the purpose of this scenario, but all will be revealed in time. Session 2. The players are provided with their original characters, no more princes for them. After the players have met up, made introductions and so on, they will at one point be tasked by the mayor of a mid-sized town to go and investigate why a certain influential merchant who lives on a farm a few hours outside town has failed to show up to a very important business meeting several days ago. His children, a man and a woman, are seemingly also missing. Players are tasked/hired to find all the missing persons. When the players go outside town to investigate, they will discover whatever the princess did to the keep and the duke in the introduction scenario. For example, if the princess burns the place down to make it look like an accident, then a burned down farm is all they find, and maybe some scorched corpses. The players will discover recent horse tracks in the mud, clearly visible after a recent rainfall, leading away from the perhaps torched barn. If the players follow the tracks for about an hour into the wilderness, they will stumble upon a cave opening. The cave is completely dark, and a faint stench of rot stems from inside. Torches or another light source will be required to enter. What follows is a bit of a dungeon crawl, however with no enemies. The deeper they go into the dungeon, the worse the stench of rot becomes. The dungeon is all made of rock, but after a period of time, they will stumble upon a crude wooden door to the side of the hallway they are traversing. If they enter the pitch black room, they will find a crude wooden table which a person lies upon. This person looks terrible, extremely pale skin, lips withdrawn, revealing seemingly sharpened teeth. Very little hair on the head, and the only piece of clothing is a loincloth. The person has bruises on his head and is unconscious but breathing slowly. He cannot be woken up, and there is no communication possible with the man. How he is alive with seemingly no food or water available anywhere puzzles the players. The man looks more undead than alive, but is breathing, however, as mentioned. While the players investigate this person, they suddenly hear a faint female scream from deeper within the dungeon, only followed by complete silence once again. The players can then delve deeper into the dungeon. I'll probably draw a map at some point. Investigating several rooms, finding more and more strange things and items. In one room, for example, they find the corpse of a fire slayer, his runes no longer glowing, indicating he's been dead for a while. Eventually, the players will stumble upon a large room, which holds an old crude wooden chair at the opposite end of the entrance. The only object of interest inside is a painting lying on the ground in front of the chair. See handout B. When the players stumble upon the courtroom, I do suspect the truth is slowly dawning on my players at this point. A fight will most certainly happen. The room contains a judge. Think Grand Justice Gourmet in miniature, with intestines as a judge's wig, etc. And an executioner with a large axe, a few crypt ghouls, a few armed crypt guards, one of them carrying a banner composed of some poor bastard's skin. 2 beheaded bodies lies on the scene next to the judge and executioner, the missing children of the missing merchant. And, most importantly, 3 or 4 huge crypt horrors, which are the princes in case you were wondering. However the players deal with this fight or flight, then concludes this adventure and my unrelated campaign can begin afterwards. I think this is a cool way to introduce my players to Warhammer Age of Sigmar and showcase what kind of universe this is and can be. Don't trust anything, cause you might be a delusional ghoul at the end of the day. And that's my idea. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Anything in between? How would you improve this? I know it's probably not perfect and I cannot control my players. They are probably going to do things I would never suspect, which is always the case in the role-playing games. But yeah, I think this is somewhat a cool way to, as I said, introduce players to Age of Sigmar and the different races you can encounter and teach them not to trust anything at all. But please let me hear your opinion in the comments and thank you for listening and happy role-playing.